I remember sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I had just heard the words, simple, direct, and devastating, "I don't feel the same way." And in that moment, I felt like I was collapsing in on myself, like every insecurity I'd ever had lined up in my head and said, "See, we were right about you." And let's just be real for a second. Rejection from someone you love, it doesn't just hurt. It can feel like proof that you're not enough, not lovable enough, not worthy enough. And if we're not careful, we start telling ourselves a story that isn't true. But here's what I've learned, both from research and from my own faceplant moments. Rejection isn't proof of unworthiness. It's proof that we were brave enough to show up in the first place. And how we handle that rejection, that's what defines our story moving forward. So let's talk about it. 5 things that can help us walk through rejection without losing ourselves. First, rejection is not an identity, it's an experience. It's funny how fast we turn an experience into a definition of who we are. The moment we feel rejected, we don't just think, ouch, that hurt. No, we take it a step further. We turn it into, I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm too much. I'm not enough. And listen, I get it. When we love someone, really love them, we're not just offering affection, we're offering pieces of ourselves. Our hopes, our stories, our quirks, the weird, wonderful, messy parts of who we are. And when that love isn't returned in the way we hoped, it can feel like they're rejecting us. Not just the relationship, not just the timing, but who we are at our core. But here's the thing. Rejection is an event. It's something that happens to us, not something that defines us. There's research that backs this up. Neuroscientists have found that rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. That's why when we're rejected, we don't just feel bad, we feel it in our bodies. Tight chest, stomach in knots, throat closing up. Our brain registers rejection like a wound. And if we're not careful, we start treating it like a permanent scar. But rejection isn't proof of our unworthiness. It's proof that we were brave enough to show up in the first place. I remember talking to someone who had been deeply hurt by rejection. They had poured years into a relationship thinking it was leading toward marriage, only to be told, "I just don't see a future with you." And you know what they said? They told me, "I feel like I'm disposable, like I was something to try on and return when it didn't fit." And I get that, I do. But here's the thing. Rejection says a lot about the other person, their capacity, their desires, their readiness, but it says nothing about our value. The problem is we don't hear it that way. We don't just take rejection as their truth. We take it as the truth. But if someone doesn't choose you, that doesn't mean you are unchoosable. If someone doesn't love you the way you love them, that doesn't mean you are unlovable. It's like this. Imagine you're an artist and you paint something deeply personal. You pour yourself into it. You stand back and you love what you've created. Then someone walks by, looks at it, shrugs, and says, not my style. That's rejection. It stings. But does that mean your painting has no value? No. It just means that person wasn't the right audience for it. But here's where we get into trouble. Instead of accepting that not everyone will love our art, we start questioning whether we should have painted at all. We start thinking, maybe my colors were wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have used this style. Maybe I'm just not good at this. And when we do that, we slowly start making ourselves smaller. We start dimming our own light just to avoid ever feeling rejection again. And that's the real heartbreak, because then we're not just losing a relationship, we're losing ourselves. So what do we do with this? How do we sit with rejection without letting it define us? We have to separate the feeling from the fact. The feeling is real. Rejection hurts. But the fact is, You are still whole. You are still worthy. You are still you. And if rejection is just an experience and not an identity, then it means one thing. You can walk through it and come out the other side. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Second, clarity is kindness, even when it hurts. I don't know about you, but I would rather sit in uncertainty than hear a truth I don't want to accept. If someone tells me, I'm not sure how I feel, or I just need time, I can take that and run with it. I can fill in the blanks with hope, with possibility, with just enough maybe to keep me from fully grieving what's already gone. But here's the hard truth. Ambiguity is crueler than rejection. I remember talking to someone who had been stuck in an almost relationship for years. You know the kind where the connection is strong, the feelings are deep, but the commitment is blurry. Every time they started pulling away to protect themselves, the other person would pull them back in just enough to keep them holding on. A message here, a deep conversation there, just enough crumbs to keep them hungry for something real. And when it finally ended, when they finally got the clarity they had been avoiding, it broke them. But you know what they said to me months later? I wish I had let it break me sooner. Because when we don't have clarity, we don't heal. When we hold on to someone's maybe, we keep ourselves from fully moving forward. And listen, I get why people avoid giving clarity. It's uncomfortable. No one wants to be the bad guy. No one wants to sit across from someone they care about and say, I don't love you the way you deserve to be loved. It feels cruel. But I promise you, false hope is cruel. The most compassionate thing someone can do for us, even when it breaks our heart, is tell us the truth. And the most compassionate thing we can do for ourselves is accept that truth even when we hate it. But here's where it gets tricky. Because when we get clarity, we don't always listen to it. We hear, I don't feel the same way, and instead of accepting it, we translate it. We turn it into, not now, but maybe later. We tell ourselves, they just need time. They'll realize what they lost. If I just prove I'm good enough, they'll come back. And when we do that, we're not honoring the truth. We're twisting it into something that protects us from pain, but keeps us stuck in the process. So what do? How do we let clarity set us free instead of letting it destroy us? First, we believe people the first time they tell us how they feel. Not the second, not the third, not after we've rewritten their words in a way that's easier to swallow, the first time. If someone says they don't want to be with us, we believe them. Second, we resist the urge to negotiate for love. Love isn't a debate. It's not something we convince someone into feeling. If we have to beg for it, it's not love. It's desperation. And I say that with love because I've been there. I've sat in that space where I thought, if I could just be different, if I could just be more of what they want, maybe then they'd choose me. But the truth is, real love doesn't work that way. Love is not a contract we earn, it's a gift that is freely given. And third, we remind ourselves that clarity, no matter how painful, is a doorway, not a dead end. It doesn't mean we aren't lovable. It doesn't mean we won't find the kind of love we deserve. It just means this wasn't it. And the sooner we accept that, the sooner we stop knocking on a closed door and start walking towards something better. So if you've been given clarity, if someone has told you the truth about how they feel, let yourself feel the hurt, but don't ignore the gift. Because as much as rejection stings, false hope keeps us trapped. And you deserve more than that. Third, rejection triggers shame, but we don't have to listen. The moment we experience rejection, shame shows up uninvited. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask permission. It just kicks the door down and makes itself at home. And shame is sneaky. It doesn't just say, wow, that hurt. It says, of course they didn't choose you. Why would they? It doesn't stop at this relationship didn't work out. It twists the knife with, you're not enough. You never were. That's the thing about shame. It doesn't just comment on what happened. It makes up a story about who we are. And if we're not careful, we believe it. Rejection is hard enough on its own, but when shame gets involved, it turns one painful moment into an entire identity crisis. Instead of seeing rejection as a part of life, we start seeing ourselves as fundamentally unworthy. And let's be clear, shame isn't just an uncomfortable feeling, it's paralyzing. It makes us want to hide. It makes us want to disappear. It makes us swear to ourselves that we will never put our hearts on the line again. Because that's shame's number one goal, to keep us small, to keep us from trying, to keep us from loving. Because if we don't risk anything, we can't get hurt, right? But here's the truth about shame. It only thrives in silence. The moment we name it, the moment we say out loud, hey, I'm struggling with this. I feel like I wasn't good enough. I feel like this rejection confirms all my worst fears about myself. Shame starts to lose its power because shame wants us isolated. It wants us believing that we're the only ones who have ever felt this way. But the reality, every single person who has ever loved deeply has also felt the sting of rejection. Every single one. I remember talking to someone who had just gone through a brutal breakup. They told me, I feel like I failed, like I wasn't good enough to make them stay. And I asked, if your best friend came to you and said that, would you agree? They immediately said, of course not. I'd tell them they are still worthy, still lovable, still enough. So why is it so hard to say the same to ourselves? Because shame makes us think we're the exception, that we're the one person who is truly unlovable. But it's a lie that keeps us from healing, from opening up, from ever letting ourselves try again. So how do we shut shame down before it takes over? First, we talk about it. We say, I feel like this rejection means I'm not enough, but I know that's shame talking, not truth. We tell a trusted friend, someone who can remind us who we are when we forget. Second, we separate what happened from what it means. Rejection is an experience. It is not a reflection of our worth. Someone else's feelings don't define our value. And third, we practice self-compassion like our life depends on it. Because honestly, it does. We talk to ourselves the way we would talk to someone we love. We remind ourselves that this pain is temporary, but our worth is not. Because here's what I know for sure. Shame is loud, but truth is louder. And the truth is, rejection is a part of life. It's a risk we take when we choose to love. But the real tragedy isn't being rejected. It's letting shame keep us from ever trying again. Fourth, self-worth is an inside job. Rejection has this way of making us forget who we are. One moment we feel like we're standing on solid ground, and the next, it's like someone pulls the rug out from under us. And suddenly, we're questioning everything. Was I not good enough? Was I too much, not enough of something? And before we know it, we've handed over our self-worth like it's something other people get to decide. Like someone else's choice not to love us is evidence that we're unlovable. But here's the truth. Our worth was never up for debate. Not when they loved us, and not when they left. I've spent years researching shame, belonging, and self-worth, and if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. When we tie our worth to someone else's acceptance, we make them the gatekeepers of something they were never meant to hold. But I get it. I do. We're wired for connection. We're built to want to belong. So when someone we love rejects us, it doesn't just feel painful. It feels personal. Like they saw all of us and said, no thanks. But that's not what's happening. Rejection is about fit, about timing, about someone else's capacity to love, not about whether we are worthy of love in the first place. Imagine this. You walk into a bookstore and pick up a novel. You skim a few pages, then put it back. Maybe it's not your genre. Maybe you're just not in the mood for that kind of story. But does that mean the book has no value? No. It just means it wasn't the right fit for you. And yet when we experience rejection, we don't just think, I wasn't their fit. We think, I wasn't worth choosing. But self-worth doesn't work that way. It's not something we earn by being lovable enough, successful enough, attractive enough. It's something we claim simply because we exist. But I know knowing that and feeling that are two different things. So how do we hold on to our worth when rejection shakes us to the core. First, we remind ourselves that no amount of rejection can take away something that already belongs to us. If self-worth is an inside job, then it means no one else has the power to give it to us or take it away. Second, we stop outsourcing our validation. If someone's love or approval is the only thing making us feel worthy, we will always be at the mercy of their choices. And that's a dangerous place to live. And third, we practice radical self-acceptance. Not, I will love myself when I find the right person. Not, I will be enough when someone else says I am. But I am already enough right now as I am. Because at the end of the day, the most important relationship we will ever have is the one we have with ourselves. And rejection doesn't get to write our story. It's just a plot twist, not the ending. Fifth, healing happens when we choose to keep our hearts open. After rejection, the temptation is always the same. Shut down, build walls, and promise ourselves that we'll never let anyone get that close again. It feels like self-protection, like the only way to guarantee we never feel that kind of pain again. And I get it. When you've been vulnerable, when you've loved someone with your whole heart, only to hear, I don't feel the same way, it feels like the logical response is to put up armor, to make sure no one ever has the chance to wound you like that again. But here's the problem. When we close off pain, we also close off love. It's like building a fortress. We think we're keeping rejection out, but we're also trapping ourselves inside. We might feel safe, but we're also alone. And after a while, that loneliness starts to feel just as painful as the rejection ever did. I once heard someone say, I'm just tired of trying. Every time I open up, I get hurt. What's the point? And honestly, I couldn't argue with their exhaustion, because being brave with your heart is exhausting. It takes effort. It takes courage. And when it doesn't go the way we hoped, it takes everything in us to not let that pain make us bitter. But here's the truth. Love is always a risk. Always. And the goal isn't to avoid the pain of rejection altogether. That's impossible. The goal is to learn how to move through it without losing ourselves. So how do we do that? How do we keep our hearts open when all we want to do is shut down? First, we acknowledge the pain without letting it define us. We don't have to pretend we're fine when we're not. We don't have to rush to find meaning in something that just hurts. But we also don't have to let that pain build a wall between us and the life we want. Second, we remind ourselves that rejection is redirection. I know. That sounds like one of those feel-good sayings people throw around when they don't know what else to say. But here's why it matters. If someone isn't meant to be in our lives, if someone doesn't have the capacity to love us the way we deserve, then their rejection is not the loss we think it is. It's making space for something better. And third, we choose courage over comfort, because shutting down is comfortable, hiding is comfortable, but nothing beautiful comes from a life lived in hiding. Love is risky, but so is never trying. So is waking up 10 years from now and realizing we let one person's inability to love us change the way we show up in the world. And that's not who we are. We are the kind of people who keep showing up, who keep choosing love even when it's scary, who refuse to let one rejection, or even 10, convince us that we are not worth loving. Because the truth is we are, always have been, always will be. Rejection hurts. There's no way around that. It shakes us, makes us question ourselves, and sometimes leaves us wondering if we'll ever feel whole again. But here's what I want you to remember. Rejection is not a reflection of your worth. It is not the final word on your story. It is not proof that you are unlovable. It's just one chapter, one moment, one experience in a life that is still unfolding. You are not the love you didn't receive. You are not the person who walked away. You are not defined by someone else's inability to see your value. You are whole, you are enough, and you are worthy regardless of who chooses you. So let this rejection be what it is, a redirection, not a definition. Let it hurt, but don't let it harden you. Keep your heart open. Keep believing in love. Keep believing in yourself. Because the love that is meant for you, it won't require you to beg for it. It won't leave you wondering. It will meet you where you are, see you for who you are, and choose you fully. Until then, choose yourself again and again. Good luck. You've got this.